kahanga-hanga, kayong ang sarili, laan sa pagsisilbi. Kayong ang ligaya ay nasa ngiti ng bawat dukha't api. Walang hinahangad na gantimpala, kundi ang makitang bayan ay malaya. Walang katumbas ni anumang halaga, dakila ninyong gawa. Mabuhay kayong mga di pangkaraniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay walang hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo kailanman. Kahanga-hanga, kayong bumabago sa lipunan at sa mundo. Ang kapuluhan ninyo'y mamamalagi at di maitatanggi. Sa bawat pahina ng kasaysayan ay gintong talang laging masisilayan, at ang kahulugan sa mahihirap, liwanag ng isang bagong bukas. Mabuhay kayong mga di pangkaraniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay walang hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo kailanman. Mabuhay kayong mga di pangkaraniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay walang hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo kailanman. Mabuhay kayong mga di pangkaraniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay walang hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo, mabuhay kayo, mabuhay kayo kailanman.
Mataas na bundok ngayoy patag, disyerto ng masukal na gubat. Taglamig ay taginip, tagulan ay tagaraw. Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Baliktad na ang mundo, baliktad na ang mundo. Mga kriminalang malaya, ang nakakulong walang sala. Ang tama ay mali, ang masama'y mabuti. Sinungaling ang pinaniniwalaan, magnanakaw ang pinagtitiwalaan. Sa lipunang ito, sila'y pinararangalan. Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Ano ba itong gulugulong gulo-gulo? Baliktad na ang mundo, baliktad na ang mundo.
Himig ito ng Pilipinong di muli paluluwa. One time, dala nila ako sa garahe. Maraming nakakatipon na mga sundalo. Parang naglalasing pa yata sila eh. Pinapunta ako sa gitna. Pinahubad ang aking pantalon at ang aking briefs. At yung isa ay naghanda ng stick, nilagyan ng sabon para ipasok sa aking ari. Siyempre, umiiyak ako kasi hindi ko ma-imagine kung anong sakit ang mangyayari. One time, pinatawag ako, pinaangat ang aking dalawang paa, nakastretch, at yung opisyal, isang lieutenant, na naging commissioner pa ng customs, na-promote nung panahon ni Cory. May dala siyang soft drink bottle at unti-unting ihinahataw sa aking hita. Hindi naman masakit, siyempre, dahan-dahan lang eh. Hindi ko alam na it would take forever. Yung papalitan siya ng iba at 4 hours tuloy-tuloy yung paghataw. The following day, kulay litso na siya. The third day, umihina ako ng dugo. And it was painful. It was really painful. She was repeatedly raped. Several months. In fact, kahit may period sila, nire-rape pa rin sila. Eventually, nung siguro hirap na sila na to take care of them, they were executed. At yung grupo na gumawa nito ay identified namin. Yung leader ng grupo ay identified namin. Alam namin ang pangalan nung intelligence team. Ground Team 205 ang tawag. Ground Team 205.
I signed Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
Naalala niyo po ba kung nasaan po kayo nung martial law po?
Nagtuturo ako sa Asian Institute of Management. Pagising ko sa umaga, lahat ng radyo off.
There was no newspaper, no TV. I was at home. And then people were scared.
Nasa US ako. Sabi pa nga ng ibang mga kasamahan ko, huwag ka nang umuwi. Ay, nakakatakot ang martial law.
Ako ay nasa underground na. I was 23.
Mga 20 years old lang ako noon.
25 ba?
25 po.
Kung ano po ba yung personal niyo po na naranasan under martial law, kung gaano po kahirap yung panahon po na yun?
Niread yung bahay namin noong April 4, 1973.
Walang katanong-tanong, umabot na kagad yung hataw ng baril, yung suntok, yung sipa, at saka yung sigaw na, dapa, dapa, dapa.
Kaya sabi ko, sino kayo? Sabi niya, Manila Police Intelligence daw sila.
Nilagay ako sa isang room na walang bintana. Tapos naka-chain ako sa bed. Practically every day, tinorture ako eh.
I was ordered to remove my pants at pilit nilang pinasukan ng ting-ting ang aking penis.
Pinilit akong marin yung aking blusa at doon nilagay nila yung yung wire dito sa aking dito sa suso ko na napakasakit masyado. At
nakatakas ako, si Lily, pinag-initan nila yung kapatid kong babae na pinatay nila. Inano nga siya, inautopsy, pero yung brain niya nandito na sa digestive system. Binaboy nila si Lily. Hindi ko rin siya napuntahan na sa burol niya. Kasi hinahanap nga kami ng kuya ko. Tapos shoot to kill ang order sa akin noon.
Kung mababalik niyo po yung oras, may gusto po ba kayong baguhin sa mga naging desisyon niyo, sa mga ginawa niyo?
Hindi ako nagsisisi na nangyari sa akin yun eh. Eh kung babalikan ko pa rin, gagawin ko pa rin yun eh.
It's the same path that I would take.
After all these years, napatunayan din na yung ginagawa ko noon, tama rin yun.
Dapat may lumaban talaga kasi kung hindi, kawawa ang bayan natin. Lagi tayong inaapi-api na lamang.
Kung meron po ba kayong maipapayo sa mga kabataan ngayon, ano po yun?
Kahit saan ako pumunta sa mga kabataan, nagsasalita ako, sinasabi ko lagi na never again to martial law.
Applicable pa rin yung sinasabi ng mga matatanda. Ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan. Kung hindi natin matututunan ang mga leksyon ng kasaysayan, mauulit natin ang mga pangyayaring hindi na dapat maulit.
Kami ang mga naglamay sa gabi para masilayan ninyo ang isang magandang araw.
Ilang taon ka na?
I'm 22 years old.
20 years old na po ako.
19 na taong gulang na po.
Bumoboto o botante ka ba?
Bali, first time kong boboto this year.
Opo, butante na po. Ano ka tingin mo yung mga nagawa ng martial law panahon ni Marcos?
Mas pinaiiral yung batas. May disiplina po yung tao. Alam po nila yung curfew.
Maganda naman po siya para sa bansa natin.
Kay Ferdinand Marcos, naging maayos yung pamamalakad niya rin. Sobrang higpit talaga niya. Pero yung higpit niya is parang pagmamahal na magulang. Marami naman po silang napatupad na batas.
Maganda naman po yung nangyari po nun sa Pilipinas.
Pabor ka ba sa martial law years ng mga Marcos?
Para sa akin, okay naman po.
Apo.
Pabor ako. Pabor po.
Opo.
Sa pagkakataong ito, ako naman yung magpapakilala sa'yo.
Apo.
Ako si Danilo Malyari de la Puente. Isa akong biktima ng martial law.
Biktima ako ng mga karapatang pantao noong panahon ni Marcos. Kasama ako doon sa mga nagrarally kasi dahil miyembro ako ng isang asosasyon, Urban Poor Association. Nagkaroon ako ng masamang karanasan nung nasa kulungan ako. Nag-ahasa ako.
Ngayon yung kaibigan ko, hindi ko alam na may dala palang leaflets, yung mga flyers na pinamimigay para ilinaw kung bakit kami nandun at tumututol kami sa demolition. Lumapit ako. Isinama rin akong hinuli. Ang pangit ang pagkakaano sa amin, pasabi sa amin, mga putang ina nyo, ang babaho ng mga pukid nyo, magsipagpaniguan kayo.
Naglalaro ako ng basketball. Pinaguhuli kami. Dahil ako daw ang mag-aagis ng granada sa rally sa Manila. Sabi ng pumasok isang sundalong lasing. Sabi sa amin, hubad. Nakakawasan ng bangko. Pinagpapalo kami. Hindi ka naman pwedeng umilag eh. Kasi pag umilag ka, lalong dadagdagan.
Ang masaklap lang sa nangyari sa bayaw ko, sa isang kwarto na punong-puno ng yelo, dalawa silang magkasama. Walang damit at kinulong sila doon ng 3 araw.
Pinasok na kami sa Bartolina. Nagalito na nga ata ang lapad, oh. 17 kami. Ang isa pang mabigat, yung electrocution. Una, mahina, umaabot lang dito, pang sumunod. Dito na. Tapos, ang pinakapangatlo, nandito na. Pinakapang-apat, malapit na doon sa membrane ng utak ko. Na kapag yun umabot doon sa membrane ng utak ko, patay ako noon.
At yung isang kasama ko rin, nahuli, pinasok siya sa isang madilim na kwarto, nilagyan ng kuryente yung 2 suso niya, yung 2 utong niya, nilagyan din ng kuryente yung ari niya at kinuryente siya.
Ginamitan din ako ng Russian roulette. Yung Russian roulette, yung 38 caliber revolver na merong isang bala pinakita sa akin. Tapos pag lock na ganon, itinutok sa sentido ko, tapos kinalabit yun habang tinatanong ako. 3 beses yun.
Pwede pong pahag.
Grabe po pala yung mga nangyari ng martial law.
Iba po yung kwento ng naririnig ko sa schools.
Pero wala akong maalala na talagang lessons or bibigay sila ng education about that.
Sorry po talaga. Sana po maintindihan niyo ko. Kasi po wala po talaga ako alam sa martial law.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Ang mga video na napanood nyo ay mula sa Rappler at sa Campaign Against the Return of the Marcoses and Martial Law o Karma PH. Bago tayo magsimula, narito ang ilang alituntunin na dapat nating tandaan sa kabuuang daloy ng programa. Hinihiling ng pamunuan ng programang ito na sundin ng mga kalahok ang mga sumusunod na paalala. Ang lahat ng kalahok ay ilalagay sa mute o papatayan ng mikropono sa oras na magsimula ang programa. Ito ay upang maiwasan ang anumang ingay na maaaring makasagabal sa talakayan. Inaasahan ng mga kalahok na panatiling mainam at profesional ang kabuuang talakayan. At pagkatapos ng pagtalakay ng mga tagapagsalita, magkakaroon ng open forum upang buksan ang hapag sa mga katanungan ng mga kalahok. Ang lahat ng mga katanungan na nais ipahatid ay maaaring ilagay sa link na ipapadala ng aming komite sa chat box ng Zoom at sa comment section ng Facebook Live at YouTube bago at pagkatapos ng talakayan. Kung nais niyong personal na ipabatid ang inyong katanungan, maaari niyong pindutin ang raise hand function upang makilala at mangyaring buksan ang inyong mikropono, ipakilala ang pangalan at institusyon at ang inyong katanungan. Huwag kalimutang sabihin kung para kaninong ang mga katanungang ito. Iyon lang po at maraming salamat. Ngayong handa na ang lahat, ating simula ng programa ngayong hapon sa isang sandali ng katahimikan na susundan ng ating pambansang awit. Ating ngayong kantahin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, pero sa sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng pagaw, ay hinatang tulak, awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang isang lang matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagkikinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin, lumang ang araw ng walang pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, ang inigaya ng pagkay mag-aaming, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Isang makasaysayang araw sa lahat at maligayang pagdating sa ika-4 na hampas ng Balud Wave-inar History Lecture Series na may temang Pagtukib, Uncovering the Untold Stories of Marcoses Martial Rule. Ang Balud History Lecture Series ay isang aktibidad na inorganisa ng UPV Camaragtas, isang pangkursong organisasyon ng mga mag-aaral ng kasaysayan sa University of the Philippines Visayas noong Agosto 2019 sa layong mas ipalapit ang pag-aaral ng kasaysayan sa mga estudyanteng nasa iba't ibang disiplina at lapatan ng historikal na pananaw ang mga kaganapan sa ating lipunan. Katuwang ng webinar na ito ang UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council, UPV Sakdag, UPV Economicus, UPV Statistical Society, UPV Biological Society, UPV PH Pub, UPV Discursus, UPV Sociological Society, Antique National School Supreme Student Government at West Visayas State University Social Science Student Society. Pasasalamat din sa mga sumusunod na media partners ng webinar na ito, ang UPV Chemistry Society, UPV Comsci.org, UPV Mathematics Circle, UPV Libertas, UPV Tacloban College Student Council, UPV College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences Student Council, UPV School of Technology Student Council, at UPV University Student Council. Maraming salamat din sa mga speakers at talamak pa rin ang pilit na pagbalukot sa mga naratibo ng nakaraan. Kaya naman, isang malaking hamon para sa atin na ipalaganap kung ano ang katotohanan at labanan ang anumang paraan ng pagbabago sa naratibo ng ating nakaraan. Kaya naman, upang formal na buksan ang ating talakayan ngayong hapon, narito si Mr. Rad Xavier R. Sumagaysay mula sa History Cluster ng UP Visayas para sa kanyang pambungad na pananalita. Atin siyang bigyan ng virtual na palakpakan.
So thank you, Frances, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. I am pleased to welcome you to the Balud Wave-inar 4, Pagtukib, Uncovering the Untold Stories of Marcos's Martial Rule. This is a part of a series of history lectures by UPV Camaragtas, which aims to promote learning and appreciation for our history. And today's topics are most timely indeed, with September being the month of remembrance for Ferdinand Marcos's declaration of martial law. Now more than ever, it is important to recognize and hold accountable the atrocities of the Marcos regime, especially now with a political climate that terrifyingly mirrors that of martial law, with a recently passed na terror law that aims to crack down on dissenting voices, the continued killings and disappearances of activists, as well as the silencing of media outfits. And I'm sure you've heard the recent news, man, na with the upcoming 2022 elections and the threat of a Marcos return to power looming over us. Perhaps we may have encountered friends and family affected by the rampant historical denialism of the Marcos regime, or perhaps we may have recently engaged in discussions or even arguments regarding the memory of martial law. Or perhaps some of us here today might not be too familiar with the events of the period. We hope that today's event can give us additional insight and help equip us with the tools to confront this turbulent and painful event in history. As students of history, it is our moral duty to safeguard the past, to celebrate the struggles and sacrifices of those who came before us, and to remember the victims, the heroes, and the martyrs who gave up their lives so that we may enjoy ours. Let us remain vigilant against all forms of fascism and dictatorship. And so once again, welcome to Balud Wave-inar 4, Pagtukib, Uncovering the Untold Stories of Marcos's Martial Rule. And lastly, never forget, never again to martial law, no to historical distortion, and always Marcos, not a hero. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy today's event. Yeah.
Maraming salamat sa iyong pagbati, Sir Rad. Ngayon naman, habang fresh pa tayo, bago tuluyang magsimula ang ating programa, hinihiling naming makunan ng larawan ang mga kalahok kasama ang pamunuan at mga panauhing tagapagsalita. You may open your camera. No. Ayun. Thank you po sa pag-on ng camera. Ngayon naman, dadako tayo sa ating talakayan ngayong hapon. Paalala lamang na mangyaring ilagay sa mute ang sarili habang nagkakaroon ng talakayan upang maiwasan ang anumang sagabal. Pagkatapos ng talakayan ay ating bubuksan ng hapag para sa open forum dito. At dito, maaari kayong magbigay ng katanungan sa link na isisend sa chat box ng Zoom. At para naman sa mga kalahok natin sa Facebook at live, maaari nyo itong ilagay sa link na isisend sa comment section. Ang una nating tagapagsalita ay si Professor Thomas D. Taliedo, at siya ipakikilala ni Philip Angelo T. Hinosa, Chairperson ng UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council.
Hello, saglit lang po. Wait lang sir. Bago tayo magsimula, pabatid muna no, na hindi pa rin nakakapasok si Sir Tom sa ating Zoom room dahil sa technical problems at sa kasalukuyan po namin itong inaayos. Mangyari lamang po na maaari ay tumungo muna tayo sa ikalawa nating tagapagsalita, Sir Elgin.
Hi. Okay.
Umanhin at muli pa umanhin sa inconvenience na dala nito, no? At sa kasalukuyan po ay nagko-communicate po kami kay Sir Tom upang makapasok sa Zoom meeting. Yun lamang po at ipakikilala siya. Ang ating unang tagapagsalita ay ipakikilala ni Dave. Maraming salamat.
Hello, good day everyone. Okay, so I hope na makahabol man si Sir sa aton. So our first presenter indeed is Sir Elgin Glenn R. Salomon. He is an instructor at the Division of Social Sciences, College of Arts and Sciences, University of the Philippines, Visayas, Miagao, Iloilo. He is also a student of the MA Philippine Studies program at the Asian Center, University of the Philippines, Diliman. And his research interests include visual methodologies, subaltern studies, and martial law in Mindanao, particularly in the Sulu Archipelago. He recently published his article on the city Beautiful Planet of Iloilo City at the Philippine Sociological Review, the volume 67, and his presentation is part of his MA thesis entitled Testimonial Narratives of the Tausug Survivors During the 1974 Battle of Jolo, Counter History, Identities, and Solidarity. Some portions of his presentation were delivered at the 23rd Cornell Southeast Asian Program Graduate Student Conference at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and the 4th workshop of the Reconceptualizing of the Cold War Underground Experience in Asia at the National University of Singapore, and the Inter-Asia Cultural Studies Society Main Conference 2021, also held at the National University of Singapore. At ngayon, bigyan natin ng virtual na palakpak si Mr. Elgin Glenn R. Salomon.
Okay, so before I start my presentation, of course, I need to share my slide. Wait lang. Wait lang. Okay. Okay. Okay, musta kayo guys? I hope same naman tayo ngayon. Okay, so I will play 2 videos on the 1974 Battle of Jolo. So let's watch.
Wala niya.
Ano dyan mga bata, alis?
Hindi kasi.
Sorry.
Oy, si mana
mga bata ba doon dagang ito mag-ignal?
Magkalang, magkalang.
Sakay mo na dito. Lugar. Okay. So, I will show you another video. So, shorter lang tong video na to. Okay. Wala tong audio, guys. So, yeah. So, makita natin yung extent ng damages sa town of Jolo after the 1974 battle. So, basically, it was taken 3 weeks after the burning of Jolo, and obviously, the civilians have not yet recovered from the damages brought by this disastrous event. So, as you can see, you can still hear gunshots from the distance, which means that the war on the island was still going on. So, currently, the video only has around 500 views, so it means that only a few people have watched it. No, so meaning hindi talaga siya familiar. Sa madlang. Okay, so hello guys. So this afternoon I am going to talk about the testimonial narratives of the Tausug survivors during the 1974 Battle of Jolo. So just a quick overview. So on February 7, 1974, a violent clash happened between the Moro National Liberation Front, a Moro secessionist group in Mindanao, and the Philippine State Forces. It left 2/3 of the town of Jolo into ashes. And according to the New York Times and the intelligence report from the CIA, around 40,000 people were left homeless, with more than 300 were found dead. Take note that the figures remain disputed depending on the sources. So for example, the MNLF would say that around 10,000 people died during the time. So the New York Times also compared the scene of devastation and ruin to what happened during World War II. Although some books and articles dealt with martial law period in Mindanao during the 1970s until the mid-80s, sources about the conflict are usually viewed in a linear dichotomous and polarizing. When we say linear, it only focuses on the chronology of the events. Meanwhile, it's dichotomous and polarizing, where the narrative is only limited to the battle between the MNLF and also the Philippine state. Aside from that, the conflict during martial law has been overshadowed by violence in recent years by contemporary extremist groups like Abu Sayyaf or Jemaah Islamiyah. Most importantly, despite that there are records from the archives as in government-controlled newspapers or secondary sources, the in-depth personal experiences of the civilians who directly witnessed and survived the said conflict remain silent and displaced. So, for our presentation this afternoon, I will only focus on the lived experiences of the Tausug survivors who witnessed the militarization of Jolo and also the 1974 Battle of Jolo. Okay, I mean a militarization of Sulu and also the Battle of Jolo. So to better understand the whole conflict itself, so we need to understand its context. So for most of its history, the Tausug in Sulu Archipelago, together with other Muslim ethnic groups in mainland Mindanao, remained independent from the Western powers, which helped preserve their strong ethnic identities. Nevertheless, for some Tausug, both their victories and struggles against Spanish and American colonialism became their inspiration to aspire for freedom from the Christian-dominated Philippines. In 1939, the government established the National Land Settlement Administration, which aided in administering a larger and better integrated system of settler colonies. Encouraged by the government through propagandizing Mindanao as the land of promise, many began to migrate to the island after World War II, especially from Iloilo or Panay. As a result, the Christian population skyrocketed while the Moros were displaced in their own land. At the same time, transnational corporations expanded their plantations, which intruded in the ancestral lands of the indigenous people and the Moros. Most apparently, only a few of the repeated government promises for increased economic benefits for Muslim areas have been implemented. Later, political leaders in Manila like President Marcos have been himself begun to meddle and control the political affairs of the Moros by challenging the authorities of the local elites like Governor Ogtung Matalam and Senator Saripada Pendatun. These fissures escalated through the creation of the Ilaga, a Christian extremist paramilitary group that inflicted violence against the Maguindanao and Maranao Muslims through their collaboration with Christian politicians and the Philippine Constabulary, which is the predecessor of the Philippine National Police. By the way, many Muslims would refer the Ilaga as an acronym for Ilonggo Land Grabbers Association. Okay, so the Ilaga organized some of the most violent massacres throughout Mindanao, including the Panili Massacre of June 19, 1971, that mass murdered 70 Moros inside a mosque in Carmen, Cotabato. Countering the forces of the Ilaga, the Muslims led by Governor Matalam also created the Muslim Independence Movement on May 1968 with their armed forces called the Black Shirt or the Barakuda. Black Shirt, it's in Cotabato, Barakuda, it's in Lanao. It is also important to take note that although the province of Sulu was spared from the mass migration of Christians and its violent consequences, the news about this massacre reached the archipelago, where some of the Tausugs sympathized with their fellow Moros in mainland Mindanao. Angered by how the state forces brutalized their fellow Muslims, these abuses motivated the Tausug to join the armed secessionist movement, which would later become the Moro National Liberation Front. So this is the list of massacres that were perpetrated by the Ilaga against the Muslim population in mainland Mindanao. This was actually compiled by Dr. Lualhati Abreu in the book The Moro Reader History and Contemporary Struggles of the Bangsamoro People. So as you can see, these massacres happened even before the declaration of martial law. So just imagine around 70 people died, more than 100 people died. So all throughout Mindanao, it happened. Okay, so but let's proceed to this slide. So, but the struggle of the Moros for self-determination finally galvanized when President Ferdinand Marcos created the Operation Merdeka, where young men were conscripted to invade Sabah and reclaim its sovereignty from Malaysia. On March 17, 1968, 26 trainees were massacred in the Corregidor Island after some disagreement with the military superiors and some unmet expectation by the conscripts. Revealed to the public by Senator Benigno Aquino, this tragedy became known as the Jabida Massacre. Congressman Rashid Lukman of Lanao led a proceeding to impeach President Marcos in connection to this mass murder, but it did not get enough support in Congress. The Jabida Massacre galvanized the Moro secessionist movement, so later on it became the MNLF. So maybe you're wondering how I collected my data given that we have Miss Rona, no? So I started this study during the second semester of 2018-2019 as an MA student at Asian Center. So I already immersed in the works of literature about this subject. So the first method that I employed is, of course, to analyze the historiography of the 1974 Battle of Jolo. In this case, I classified my sources into four. We have from the Marcos government perspective, from the MNLF perspective, from the foreign sources perspective, and also we have the mainstream history perspective. So these are some of the headlines from the bulletin today that I already collected last year before the pandemic. So parang naswertehan lang, no? These were obtained from the microfilms at the UP main library in UP Diliman. So since walang digital copies dito ang UP Diliman, so pinicturan ko lahat ng mga balita or lahat ng mga articles na related sa 1974 battle. So during the time, the media is controlled by the Marcoses, obviously. So that's so basic. Okay, so Bulletin Today also became the mouthpiece of the dictatorship. So as you can see in the center of the slide, the MNLF was red tagged as Maoist because that's their way to vilify the secessionist movement. So with the Red Scare brought by the alignment of the Philippines to the United States pro-West and anti-communism bloc in Southeast Asia, like the creation of SEATO, The legacy of the Special Committee on Un-Filipino Activity, or the CUPA, that increased the anti-communist sentiments of the Filipinos, and the close ties between Sison and Miswari during their days as student activists in UP. Labeling MNLF as Maois became convenient for the government to use against the rebel group. The Tausug generally understood the word Maoist not as a form of communism that promote the socialist revolution or in the agricultural pre-industrial society, but as a godless ideology of those who were rebelling against the Philippine government. Therefore, the adherents of most Tausug to Islam urged the government to use the Maoist label, of course, to vilify the secessionist movement. At the same time, the government blamed the so-called Maoist rebels for the burning of the town. So in other words, noon pa man, uso na ang red tagging. But despite the red tagging, many Tausug were still supported. They are still supportive of the group. Okay, so this is the screenshot of this classified account from WikiLeaks. So this website is a depository of intelligence report of the CIA, and interestingly, merong data ang 1974 Battle of Jolo. Okay, so far mayroon akong dalawang nakuha sa WikiLeaks. So yun, so you need to maximize the online resources kasi mahirap ang life ngayon. Okay, especially for doing research. Okay, I also use archive articles from the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. So for the Chicago Tribune, I paid around 500 pesos just to obtain some articles. Pero sa New York Times, free naman siya. Okay, so of course, this is the crucial part. In my study, I employ the oral history through conducting in-depth and semi-structured interview with a total of 14 Tausug survivors of the 1974 Battle of Jolo. Aside from that, I also interviewed around 4 or 5 rebels. That's for another paper. So 4 or 5 MNLF members. Then we also have 14 Tausug survivors. Okay, so I interviewed 3 respondents. Last March 2018, and with the help of the UP Institute of Islamic Studies. And of course, face-to-face siya kasi wala pang bistro na. But meanwhile, the interview for the second batch of respondents was conducted from March to September of 2021 with the help of the Consortium on Bangsamoro Civil Society Incorporated. So, big shout out sa kanila. So, due to the challenges posed by the pandemic, I collected my data through phone interviews. So, connection na lang, snowball, para mas mapadali yung pag-collect ko ng data. So, questions on the narrator will cover, for example, the life of the people Jolo, the militarization of the island, the survivors' coping mechanism, the description of Zulu and his people during and after the battle, etc., etc. So, it all boils down to these topics. So, now we'll tackle the narratives itself. Now we will now proceed to the narratives. So when militarization took place on the island, the objective of the military was to suppress the elements of rebellion, obviously. So the soldiers viewed the MNLF as a contagion that may spread throughout the region. They feared that if left unattended, the rebels would further destabilize the island and Mindanao at large. The soldiers, who mostly came from Fisha-dominated Luzon and Visayas, then seized the weapons of some of the Tausug. The actions of the military trampled their honor since culturally, acquiring weapons showed their honor, bravery, and prestige. My narrators would always say that the Tausug loved their arms more than their wives. With the increasing militarization of Sulu comes the resistance of the Tausug, who became members of the MNLF. The movement of the civilians were even monitored. Hussein even pointed out that checkpoints were everywhere on the island. A cedula or community tax was often required, and failure to present it to the authority might entail interrogation or arrest. The military imposed a proper haircut to avoid suspicion of being a member of the rebel group. Okay, so the continuous militarization eventually led to brutalization in the hinterland. In the case of Abdul, they were just harvesting the copras, but the soldiers ambushed them. Unfortunately, his sister was killed. For Hussein, he was just fishing in the port with his friends, but the soldier nearly killed them. He realized that the soldier and his troops lose in an encounter. That's why he vented his anger towards them. The narrative of Ibrahim, it's common for the people to be picked up by the soldiers. Later, they would suddenly disappear or float in the sea. He added that they were living in fear. And in Farid's testimonies, he remembered how the military restricted their supply of rice to at least 2 kilos because they feared that the Tausubs might help their relatives who went to the mountains and became rebels. In another story of Farid, he remembered the reprisal or revenge of the military every time they got defeated in the battle, where they would enter another town and kill its residents. While Samira reminisces how the fruit vendors were killed by the soldiers because they assumed that they were rebels. Finally, hindi ko ito nailagay, in the narrative of Amir, his cousin was killed while plowing the field. Not contented, the soldiers burned the body. Because of these human rights violations, many Tausug joined the MNLF. Witnessing and experiencing the abuses of the military, it motivated the Tausug Moro civilians to restore honor that was trampled by the Philippine state. For some of these Tausug, there's a need to respond to these offenses, including the killings of their fellow Moros and Tausug. As stressed by Ibrahim, to quote, "We Tausug are brave that once we are stuck in a mess, our truth prevails, and we would fight back." For instance, Hussein became a member of the MNLF because his father was killed by the Air Force. What can we learn from these experiences? As long as injustices exist, people will join a revolution. However, the MNLF started losing in their bulwark by the late 1973. To avoid a cordon from the government, the rebels decided to invade Jolo. Now let's proceed to the life of Jolo before the chaos and also, of course, later on the 1974 battle. So to better understand the situation of Jolo, the narrative before the battle should be taken into consideration. So the narrators clearly remember the development of the town due to the presence of ships that docked in the town's port to acquire tons of copras. The town also harvested tropical fruits like lanzones, mangosteen, durian, langka, and produce exotic sea products like sea cucumber and pearl, and of course, mother of pearl. With its flourishing trade as an exporter of copra and other cash crops like abaca, it resulted in its economic development, in spite that it's in the periphery of the Philippines. Jolo was also home to a sizable Chinese population, or the Lanang, that engage in trade or business. One of the most recurring themes in my conversation with my narrators is the absence of conflict between Christians and Muslims. I have tons of stories from my narrators, but I'll just cite this very interesting quote from Khalifa, who attended in a Catholic school and learned the prayers of the Christians like Hail Mary. While his Christian classmates would celebrate with them every Muslim holidays like Hari Raya. So on the dawn of February 7, 1974, the rebels began to march in from Mindanan while the soldiers were sleeping. Although rumors already circulated throughout the town of their planned invasion, it still surprised the residents. Nothing prepared the civilians and their families for the chaos that they would face for the next couple of days. The government forces then started firing at the rebels when they saw that they already mobilized. Defending their respective strongholds in crucial areas, both the military and the Maoist rebels indiscriminately shot at each other. The government then began to operate the Navy and the Air Forces. The U.S. supplied Philippine government used C-47 gunship and armed helicopter to scrape and bomb the rebel force. Because of their situation, the civilians and their families then hid in the safest places in their houses. Abdul remembered his hardship while surviving the chaos. He even mentioned that for his baby to survive, he fed him a bottle of dissolved sugar. The narrators then decided to escape the town. As a kid, Ibrahim remembers that they must run towards the pier while carrying their bags. While escaping, they needed to avoid the flying bullets from both the rebels and the soldiers. The problems created by both the MNLF and the armed forces resulted in the death of many civilians who were not able to escape the tragedy. Dead bodies were found everywhere. Either they died because of the gunshots, or they were caught by the ravaging fire that spread easily throughout the town. People were afraid to pick up the rotten bodies because they might be suspected as rebels. Mario narrated that his favorite baker, who gave him a piece of bread every morning, died when he desperately went inside an oven, and assumed that he will not be spared from the fire. Aside from that, some dead bodies were thrown into the sea or were eaten by stray dogs. Abdul, Hussein, and some civilians went out of the island and migrated elsewhere. Some waited for days so that they can ride the boat or the lanchas. Because of the lack of necessities, Muhammad mentioned that many of the survivors went to Sabah and have not returned to Jolo even after the war. Jolo became a ghost town due to the mass migration of people, and the once bustling town was shattered into ashes. The survivors pointed out that both the MNLF and the military have their fair share in starting the 1974 battle. The military has the technological capacity to make the destruction possible. Of course, during martial law, the government strengthened its military with the help of the United States and through acquiring weapons like napalm bomb. But the MNLF also has a liability in the destruction of Jolo because they surprisingly entered the town and the houses of the residents, which then prompted the military to use destructive weapons. But to conclude, my presentation right now. So the statement of Hussein is more than just an expression of frustration that his family has not given compensation by the government for the atrocity that the Air Force has done to his father. Although this is beyond the scope of the 74 battle, his narratives speak volume as to how the stories of Muslim Filipinos were relegated in the periphery of discourse on martial law. 4 years have passed since the Marawi siege happened. But in the midst of a global pandemic, our Moro brothers and sisters were still displaced and were still hoping to go back to their home. Meanwhile, the Philippine government desperately red tag progressive groups that are critical in their policies. Indeed, despite that the 1974 Battle of Jolo was unfamiliar to most of our kababayans, or kayo mismo, hindi kayo familiar nito, its ghost still lingers in our present. Now more than ever, never again to martial law. That's all.
Okay, maraming salamat Sir Elgin sa pagbabahagi ng inyong kaalaman. Talagang it's true that martial law wasn't only limited sa iilang parte ng Pilipinas. It included the whole country, and it's important that we know all these narratives na usually hindi siya we don't hear about them. Ganon. So ngayon we have 81 participants in our Zoom meeting right now. I hope na naka-launch na kayo, and if ever meron kayong questions na gusto tanungin kay Sir Elgin, may link na sa Zoom chat box para sa Google Docs ng mga questions. Ayun. Ngayon naman, tayo ay tutungo sa ikalawa nating tagapagsalita, si Professor Thomas T. Taliedo, at siya ay pakikilala ni Philip Angelo Piñosa, Chairperson ng UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council. Sa muli, salamat sa aming mga katuwang sa webinar na ito, ang UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council, UPV Sakdag, UPV Economics, UPV Statistical Society, UPV Biological Society, UPV PH Pub, UPV Discoursos, UPV Sociological Society, Antique National School Supreme Student Government, at West Visayas State University. Salamat din sa mga sumusunod na media partners ng webinar na ito, ang UPV Chemistry Society, upvcomsci.org, UPV Mathematics Circle, UPV Libertas, UPV Tacloban College Student Council, UPV College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences Student Council, UPV School of Technology Student Council, at UPV University Student Council. Yun. Ayun. May tanong po para kay Sir Elgin.
Okay lang. Go guys.
Ayun. Ilaga come from where I heard stories that these these leaders represented the residents of the Iloilo towns who settled in central Mindanao in the 50s and 60s. Ayun. Saan daw
reaction
galing?
Ay, okay. Actually, if you go to Mindanao, ako taga Mindanao ako, pero hindi naman ako taga hindi ako taga Central Mindanao. Taga Zamboanga Peninsula ako. Pero based sa mga kwento din ng mga friends ko, actually, may mga barangay sa Mindanao na galing sa mga, the origin of its name galing sa mga town sa Iloilo, like Little Potota, Little Kabatuan, mga ganon. So, may sort of community sila in Mindanao. Para there's sort of belongingness na kahit na wala sila sa Visayas, but parang nakatali pa rin sila sa Visayas, given that nandun sila nakatira. Based din sa, parang malalaman mo din kung taga saan sila kasi doon sila nakatira. Parang gano'n. Yeah. I hope na-answer ko yung diba? Hints. Like, for example, yung hints. Taga Little Panay siya. Yeah. So yung si former president ng Camaragtas, taga Little Panay pala siya. Yun.
Ayun. Yes.
May questions pa kayo, go. Okay na yan.
Pwede pa magtanong?
Ayun.
Sure.
Pwede pa magtanong in relation sa unang tanong sa kanya, kay kay Professor Elgin.
Okay po.
Okay, ang katanungan ko na merong connection doon sa unang tanong na tinanong sa kanya.
Sino po to?
Professor Garcia po sa UP Tacloban.
Ay, hello po.
Oo. Kasi follow-up question lang kasi interested lang ako kung totoo nga. Kasi may nadinig akong mga kwento na ang halimbawa na ang pagbuo ng ilaga ay yung mga mismo, yung mga pinuno ng ilaga, yung mga leader mismo ng ilaga ay kabahagi ng I think 5 towns sa Iloilo. Oo, hindi ko lang ma-memorize yung sinabi. Hindi ko na matandaan yung sinabi ng kakilala ko na yung 5 taon na kasi na ito yung 5 taon sa Iloilo kung saan nanggaling yung mga migrants na nag-migrate dun sa part na yun ng Mindanao. At kung saan nagsimula yung mga hidwaan, yung mga pakikibaka, yung karahasan na namagitan sa mga Kristiyano at sa mga lumad na mga Muslim doon. So, I don't know if you have a data for this. I'm just asking kung in one way or another may may what you call this, may nadinig ka or may nakalap kang data.
Okay. Okay na pa.
Kung wala, okay lang.
Okay, sige po. Okay, so very good question, sir. Actually, sir, iba kasi ang focus ko is sa Sulu. So hindi ko pa masyado na-explore talaga yung Ilaga group. Pero personally, in my family may kilala akong Ilaga. Ganon. Kasi
buhay pa?
Patay na. In within my family. Kasi yung family ng father ko nakatira sa border town ng kumbaga sa next town nun is Lanao na. So Muslim majority na yung mga people doon. So it's one way for I think it's one way for them to defend themselves against kumbaga since they are growing na din the population is growing so they needed to defend themselves, so that's why they created that group. So so far yun pa lang alam ko. Actually may mga naikwento ko ng tatay ko. I hope hindi niya
okay.
Okay. Pero yung kwento niya is may mga sort of massacres na nangyayari or tapos may mga lootings din. Na for example, yung mga gongs, yung mga even mga Chris. Personally, may Chris kami sa bahay. Okay. May mga kami, Chris sa bahay. Tapos actually ninakaw yun ng mga Ilaga. Tapos it turns out parang pinasapasat siya sa kanunuan. So yun, yan yung pinaka-ticket nila ginagawa. Just to assert their power. But things other than that, I'm trying to siguro in the future I can delve into Ilaga. But the my focus right now is about the 74 battle. Kasi yung iba iba din yung dynamic sa Sulu, iba yung dynamic sa mainland Mindanao. Sa mainland Mindanao, uso kasi yung land grabbing doon. Mas free kasi of course mas malaki yung lupa, mas malaki yung mga taniman, so doon mas makikita natin yung parang the paradox of excesses in the sociological manner na kasi malaki yung resources, so doon nagkaroon ng competition in terms of resources. So sa Sulu naman iba yung dynamics kasi wala masyadong migration, although may mga migration naman of Christians pero hindi sila like overpowering unlike doon sa mainland. So iba yung dynamics na doon. So yun.
Thank you.
Thank you po,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you po.
Na-spill ko na yung family secret.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Elgin. Ang sasagutin lang natin ang last question.
Spill yun, ha? Charot.
Okay, sagutin lang natin yung last question, then move on na tayo sa next. And yung, kung may mga follow-up.
May question dito. Can I answer? Okay. May question about sa Bato ay ba Ilaga? Hindi siya Ilaga actually. Iba yung grupo ni Bato. Yun lang. Sa Davao, iba yung grupo niya. Nalimutan ko yung name pero iba yung grupo niya. Pero same objective pa rin. Thank you, Tidor. Iba yung focus nila. Iba yung focus nila kasi mga NPA yung target ng Tad. Yun. So yun lang. Nasagot ko.
Thank you, Sir Elgin. So, if may follow-up questions pa kayo kay Sir Elgin, meron po tayong open forum mamaya where all the questions will be addressed. Ayan. So, ngayon naman...
Frances, can I answer na lang? Kung may mga questions sa chat box, I can answer naman sa chat box para okay pa rin.
Sige.
Okay.
Okay. Ngayon naman, dadako tayo sa second speaker natin ngayong hapon na si Sir Tom na ipakikilala ni Felipe Angelo Tihinyosa, chairperson ng UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council. Ayan.
So magandang hapon sa lahat. Kasalukuyang nag-leave na si Nong Philip sa session na ito dahil may webinar din siya mamaya sa kasama ang Rappler at ako ang kanyang inatasan na ipakilala si Sir Tom on his behalf. No? So when Tomas Talyado entered UP Iloilo as a college student, Marcos's martial rule was at its height. There was no campus student organizations and the cyber world of information was not around yet. So photocopying machines came in late at UP Iloilo, thus long hours of note-taking was done practically by hand. Yet sociality was festive and socio-political discussions inside the campus, regardless of one's academic affiliation, were simply kinetic. His lecture this afternoon is entitled, What Literatures to Encounter to Know Better Marcos's Martial Law. The selected books with his annotations were those he encountered and those reframed his ways of viewing social realities. For many students, books are directly related to school requirements and examinations. But if a soul allows, it will be what Franz Kafka wrote. Book is an axe that will break the ice inside us. So bigyan natin ng isang virtual na palakpak si Professor Tomasito T. Talyado. Sir?
Yes. Good afternoon. Pamati ko sa hambal ni Quans, yung hambal ni Carl. Marxist martial law. No, I think Marcos martial law.
Marcos says, sir. Marcos says martial law.
Okay, sige. Good afternoon to all. Well, what I will share with you is not just about books, no, but my encounter with books. Let me just welcome two invitees kung nakitaan ko nga Dre. We have Professor Filino Garcia, I think he's here. I think nakitaan ko ngayang and your virtual indicator. And then, of course, Dean Jose Maritirol is also here. Nakitaan ko ngayang also his chat. Thank you for attending. So, quite a bit, a piece of me will now tell about my encounter with books in order to understand the declaration of martial law and the regime of martial law thereafter. Okay. When I encounter the literature, I'm going to share with you. It will help me and help you hopefully to understand martial law as a phenomenon. No, in my high school, in one of the sectarian schools here in the city, ang critical thinking skills ko had not been fully developed. You know, kung high school ka, what is education was obedience, di ba? You follow your teacher, you follow school administrators, or else if you don't follow, if you appear to be a maverick in your high school, you'll be black tag, meaning ano ka, you're flagged as somebody difficult to deal with. Okay, so you know when I was high school, I wasn't that. I was very cooperative. I was behaving well, and I was not critical. I'm simply one of those ordinary students. Okay. That's why ang notion of the political it dawned on me when I was in high school. It dawned on me when I was in college, because high school education is entirely different from college. When you see, when you view your college education is simply a continuation of your high school education, then nothing is happening to you. Nothing has shifted in your state of consciousness. When you're in college, you should already realize that as a college student, you are no longer, there's no need for obedience. Intellectual obedience. There's no need for intellectual obedience. There's always a need for skepticism, healthy skepticism, and probably a good dose of imagination and criticism and critical thinking. So, ang transition from high school to college is a transition that should have really been conscious experience on the part of a student. That's why when I was in college, and I enrolled in political science in UP Iloilo, but enrollment in political science in UP Iloilo does not make one or automatically makes one political. One can only be political if you become conscious that the way you see things, meaning ang lens that you see things, and reality is from the lens that you acquired, not from your home, not from your parents, not from your church, not from your barkada, but from your encounter with the body of knowledge that is political science or that is politics. So yun, conscious yan. So part of that, part and process of acquiring in my personal biography, part of acquiring political lens is my encounter with the literature of martial law. So meaning ang literature and martial law had contributed into adding within me a political lens. So therefore, I now came to view social reality from that lens. No longer from the old lens when I was in high school, no longer from the lens that I inherited from my immediate social network like family, clan, or my church, or my barkada, but it is a self-conscious absorption of a political lens. If you're in college, what intrigues you, what intrigues the students, are not just yung mga personal, individual angst mo. The surface for students, kanila personal, individual angst surfaces, and then they occupy themselves sucking out of it. But also, what intrigues a college students are the things or events that surrounds you. So hindi lang personal, kundi outside itself. No? Of course, you read newspapers to acquaint yourself with current events. But later on, you will feel the need to understand the total picture. Because ang receptions ng daily news will not give you the total picture. Ang receptions ng news, they come bits and parts. No, so there's really a need for you to see them forming a larger picture. Just like a jigsaw puzzle, nakita mo bits and parts of the puzzle, but it's all up to you to put them together. Yon, parang ganon. And if you try to put them together, you need in this sense, social science, yun eh. In this sense, nagkaroon ka sa social political lens in order to put them together and to see that as the larger picture. Or else, if you remain to see them in bits and parts, then you would not really have the full knowledge of what you encounter outside yourself. So, for my part, I personally recognize my need for that perspective, ang perspective sa social science, ang perspective of a political lens, meaning I need some sort of a theory to be able to grasp the broad picture. So that's why I have to encounter the literature. Next slide, please, Gerald. So these are the literature which I encountered, and I selected them to tell you, to share with you. Una, I listed this down. In fact, I realized later na this has already been published officially. But when I encountered this, this is a clandestine literature, meaning hindi available right away. Hindi napasa-pasa lang. This is the 1972, mind you, 1972 issue of Ang Bayan. Ang Bayan, as you know, is a underground official publications ng Communist Party. So, although 1972 siya, ang iyang issue, available na pasapasa in the school before, because essay that was reprinted by Ang Bayan, in title niya is Overthrow U.S. Marcos Dictatorship to Achieve National Freedom and Democracy. Remember, September and declarations of martial law, Ang Bayan issue came out, and this essay came out later on October 1. So, nearly a little bit more, less than a month lang ang response ng Communist Party sa declarations ng martial law. But of course, ang vocabulary or ang meaning systems that is present in this text, ang Overthrow U.S. Marcos Dictatorship, kung hindi ka prepared, if you're not prepared yet, there are things that there are words there and concepts which are maybe new to you. Kapin pa kung first year ka or second year college, parang you will not right away understand what it seeks to say. Kasi ang bayan forms a part of the larger discourse ng clandestine Communist Party. No? So, apart from that, I mean, in connection with that, dapat na-encounter mo man ang kay Amado Guerrerong book in Philippine Society and Revolution. This was published much earlier, late 60s, no? Ang publications ini. May copies ini sa UPV library, sa UP Iloilo library, but they keep it. Intago nila because when martial law was declared, in books like this, this is considered to be subversive books. So what the UP Iloilo library did is to keep it. Intago nila para hindi ma-confiscate. But later on, nag-surface ini ipagma naman nila. Because it was already, I think it was already 1981 when I was a college student. So way beyond nasa early 1970 71 Declaration of Martial Law. So nag-surface na yung topic nga ni. So kung if you want to borrow it, you just tell the librarian, this is not, it's not in the catalog. No, somebody says it's there. You tell the librarian, the librarian ask you, why do you need to read that? So you say it's part of your assignment, and then you borrow it. But you don't bring it at home. You don't borrow it. Ang room use lang to. So you read it. In case of people who are more seriously intrigued or curious, curious, you read this, and then as well as mimeograph copy of this essay, yung Overthrow U.S. Marcos. So when I read it, may mga words dira, for instance, overthrow, U.S. Marcos dictatorship, so national freedom and democracy. What do they mean? They're part of the larger technical terms and discourse, as I said, ng clandestine Communist Party. That's why when you say U.S. Marcos dictatorship, hindi nga Marcos dictatorship, may naka-active na U.S. That means it's a joint, it's a joint project of the United States and Marcos and declarations of martial law. So one has to understand that this is not just Marcos' declaration of martial law on his own. It is supported by the United States. And literature later on really revealed that U.S. could not have declared martial law on his own without the approval of the United States. Okay? Enough literature would tell you na before Marcos declared martial law, the U.S. Embassy, officers of the U.S. Embassy, had already circulated their ilang opinion nga. Really, there's a need for strong man rule in a society like ours, who at the time, according to Marcos' perception, was under siege, both from the right, meaning from the greedy politicians, corrupt politicians, and from the left, from the revolutionaries. So left and right, Philippine society is under siege, and therefore there's a need for martial law to survive, for the state to survive. Okay, but of course, Marcos asked approval from the United States, and the United States government approved. In fact, quite a bit background to that. Trend in it, this was in the early 70s, late 60s and early 70s. There's really a trend for martial law or one-man rule that happened where U.S. is hegemonic sa societies. For instance, Chile, where Allende was elected as president, because he wanted to nationalize ang copper industry. The U.S. overthrew him, it overthrew ang U.S. government, and then General Pinochet came into power. So there was also martial law and dictatorship in Chile. In Malaysia also, I think, a emergency rule was declared, and the prime minister then passed laws that are authoritarian to be able to control the Malaysian society. South Korea under Park Chung-hee, likewise. Park Chung-hee declared martial law in South Korea and ruled for quite some time. Ruled for a long number of years in South Korea. So South Korea was also under martial law and under dictatorship. So we joined the trend. Simply, Philippines joined the trend. Because the United States and Nixon doctrine encourages authoritarian rule in societies where the United States is highly connected. Okay. Ang achievements in essay is this, in my view. Kasi when I read and reread it, as it published, I think this is very indicative of the standby ang political stance sang Communist Party. When martial law was declared, there were those groups who said na Marcos was simply greedy and he seized power. Gusto niya maging magranon, gusto niya monopolize power. He did declare martial law. So there are those who maintain that thesis. There are also mga constitutionalists also says that almost said the same thing. Now, the person Marcos did all this for his own benefit. Now, in this essay, this essay revealed otherwise. The declaration of martial law, because martial law power is right there in the Constitution, right there in the Philippine Constitution, in the 1935 Constitution. Martial law are usually resorted to by constitutional government for the state to save itself. Parang self-preserving, extraordinary power of a Republican state is the declaration of martial law. In fact, if you go back sa history sa so-called martial law, ang Roman Republic has this that feature for temporary period of time when the Roman Republic is threatened, let's say by barbarians or by its enemies. They give up power in mga various bodies of the Roman Republic. They give up power and place it in the hands of a dictator. Yeah, the word dictator is technical from the standpoint of the Romans. Kasi ang dictator is parang savior siya. No? He has all the instrumentalities of the state, and therefore he can decide that there should be no need for a debate, given the fact that survival of the state is of utmost importance. So ang martial law, declaration of martial law, from the standpoint of liberal democracy, is really the state's instrument to preserve itself. Now, what this literature told us is that it's hypocritical. Ang inang theory, ang liberal democratic theory is hypocritical because in the final analysis, theory does not match what's real. Because what's real is you have here a liberal democracy unfolding itself na ang iya conclusion gali, if you use it, ang conclusion niya, ang conclusion sang theory niya is really autocracy or dictatorship or authoritarianism. So, ang liberal democratic understanding of what democracy is hypocritical, or kung i-practice mo naman siya gali, no, if you put into practice, it's not viable. Ang hypocrisy niya is it cannot be practical. Because what's practical, what's real is a dictator like Marcos can rise using the same liberal democratic theory in our constitution. So sa tanaw ko, importante gali ang essay nga to, no? Kay parang bisan mga baka martial law now, and even now in our constitution, actually if you look back at this literature, you will suspect nga the theory or the liberal democratic theory of martial law is just a plain theory, no? But under practical consideration, it would be hypocritical to pursue it. Okay? So that's the importance. Next slide, please, Jolo. The next literature is that I will discuss is in Lichauco papers. Gerald, next slide, please.
Wait lang, sir. Wait lang. Ana?
May pa. 1973 ini na-publish. Pero publish ang formal publication. Pero ang copies ini has already been circulated ahead. What is this? What is this Lichauco paper? First, who is this Alejandro Lichauco? Alejandro Lichauco is a nationalist. He works with the central bank then, under central bank governor Cuaderno. So this is Filipino ni siya. When I saw him in person later on, I was surprised nga. So yan. Parang siguro he might have some large amount of foreign blood. Si Ding, si Alejandro Lichauco. Ang Lichauco papers titled Imperialism in the Philippines, ang Lichauco paper, available when sa UPV library. It was by Monthly Review Press. Monthly Review Press, the US na naka-base. Okay, so it's in the circulation section. We read it because pero later na-publish na when I read it. Pero what we know about the Lichauco paper is that at the time when Alejandro Lichauco was a member of the Constitutional Convention that drafted the 1971 or 1973 Constitution, then circulated niyang Lichauco paper because manipis na. I think mga 70 or 80 pages. Circulated na among the delegates of the Constitutional Convention, hoping members of the Constitutional Convention would be inspired to write a nationalist constitution, but that was before and just during Marcos Marshall. At this time, sa period nga ni, ang nationalism was on the air. It can be felt on the air. So even language. So in the academic language turning to become Filipino, emphasis rather than English in the fields of culture, kinalan retrieval of culture, Filipino motif, leitmotif in culture, lalo na sa politics and economic policies. So ang box and paper nga ni Lichauco speaks of imperialism in the Philippines. What is imperialism in the Philippines? To him is the dominant presence of American multinational corporations and of American political military presence also that dominates the armed forces. The armed forces as the security policies of the country. Ang imperialism from economic point of view is maning presence sa multinational. So dominantly multinational ang presence sa ating economy. Ang multinational is ining mga American companies that are here, they are not of Filipino capitalization, American capitalization. They have their branches here or licenses, licenses here in almost all fields of the economy. So ang joke nila is all the products that Filipino use from your hair up to your foot are American made. So anong capabilities ng Filipino to produce their own product? Flashlight? No, not even. A perdible or pen? No, because we have no iron industry in the Philippines. We're so subservient. We're so dependent on imported products. We might be exporting raw materials, but in reality, we're dependent on imports. Okay, we export raw materials, but we import finished products, and that's to the anti-imperialists like Alejandro, that's tragic. Okay, my mechanism of bringing out wealth that are produced in the country out from the Philippines, and these are not reinvested in the country. So, fund transfer or what you pay the mother companies are forms of transfer of wealth. So, ang nagagawa is we're becoming poor, no? Kasi wala sing reinvestment, wala sing capital reinvestment sa ating market, sa ating industries. We're becoming poor. Ang tanan nga korta natin, and much of our money that is spent for consumption ends up abroad. If we buy soft drinks, ends up abroad. If we buy burger, it also ends up abroad. We might be buying locally, but that's only the side of the market side na sa market. Ang proceeds of capital, ang gains of capital gains goes abroad. So that's imperialism. Yes, we cannot get out from that. No, we cannot. It's difficult to become independent economically. And Lichauco described that in his book, itong imperialism in the Philippines. Politically also, we are so tied up with U.S. with security arrangements, treaties with the U.S. So we cannot afford to have a fighter plane on our own. Philippines cannot produce a fighter plane on its own. It has to buy it abroad, and it has to buy it from the United States. Even guns like Armalites for our army, we have to buy it abroad. Even bullets of high caliber, we have to buy it abroad. So, Philippine Army, even up to now, is so dependent with American arms sales. Arms sales. We buy all these arms abroad. Well, in fact, we were also aware then somewhere in Cavite, may factory na that supposedly some local factories and local explosive like bullets, etc. But one time we heard or we encountered the news that it was not that so viable. So meaning it cannot arm us. So if we are engaged in war, the Philippines is engaged in war, how long can we survive given the fact that we import our armaments? Probably 3 days, 5 days, no more after that. So Lichauco showed us how dependent we are and how dominated we are by American imperialism. So that's a revelation, because we take for granted, so much of us take for granted the U.S. presence in our economy and in our security. And in fact, many of us still love Americans, love what's Americans. Okay, next slide, please. This one. This was published in 1982. This was published in 1982. So, Lichauco paper was published earlier, but this was published in 1982. This Pumipig Glass Political Detention Military Atrocity is a book by Task Force Detainees of the Philippines. Task Force Detainees is a task force by the Association of Major Religious Superiors of the Philippines. What is this book? This is a book, lipis lang siya, available man sa una sa UP Library. This is a documentation of the detainees, of those who were imprisoned under martial law. and it also document the atrocities. Atrocities, we mean the excesses of the Philippine military on political detainees, and also of victims that were outrightly murdered or killed, or in our language today, in mga AJK victims. So in 1982, during Marcos, we have not used the word AJK yet, early on. Pero the phenomenon of political killings was already there, even before Marcos. Pero again, systematic and part of state policy ang detention, ang imprisonment without due cause, because of under martial law. There were shortcuts shortcut in terms of in the protections ng imong personal rights, civil rights, political rights. So you can be easily arrested, and then you can be detained for a period of time without filing any case against you. If there's a case filed against you, then you'll probably languish longer, no? Because resolution of cases sa mga political detainees takes so much time. You need volunteer lawyers like Free Legal Assistance Group and all the other volunteers to defend you. But anyhow, this book, for all its chapters, documents that. In fact, I wrote a book review of this movie, but it was not published. Nagsulat ako sa book review because at the time hoping na will publish it. Probably at the time, because of the hesitations, the fear. If you publish about detention and atrocities, you can get probably you can get arrested. So it was not published. I still have the manuscript with me, by the way, sa akong journals. And dito ko nakita, while I was reviewing, I wrote a book review. Indeed, grabe ang experiences of those who were detained. Some of them were detained under what they call Bartolina. Bartolina is a small, it's a small space where you can be detained alone. Wait, rather than that, you can be detained alone in a small space. So experience like that, traumatic, diba? Experience like it's traumatic because if you know, it's better to be detained together with companions, but to be detained for some time alone in a small space. It's mentally, taxing, and it can lead to some language mental health problem. More than that, it can traumatize you. In one radio interview with Jose Maria Sison by Radio Europe, I listened to that. Longer galing niya, I came to find out when he was detained almost 8 years he was detained alone, and only it was 2 years at the very end, parang 1984, 85, 86 na siya, he was made to he was put together in a detention cell together with 2 other companions, but for the 8 years, will you imagine, because you're alone, nag-iisa ka na sa loob ng kulungan na maliit. Ang size is almost like 6 by 4. So may may faucet, and then may what do you call that when you want may inodoro, faucet and inodoro lang, where you wash yourself, and it's even a source of your drinking water. No? So it's really it's really harrowing experience. So these things are there. These things are inside the are inside in this book. Now, what is interesting here is there are some pictures there in the book, and I remember quite clearly. Dari ang picture ni Tagaylilo ni siya ni Maria Luisa Pusa Dominado together with her daughter May 1. Gamay pa si May 1 kag si Maria Luisa Pusa Dominado. They were featured there na whole page of ng Pumipiglas, no? And Maria Pusa Dominado in 2012 was abducted and became a desaparecido. He was abducted and then he can no longer be, the family had not retrieved her. So parang siya ay nawala. Isa pa rin yun sa mga, that's also one of the predicament of political detainees or activists then, no? Who fought against Marcos. There were a number of those who were simply abducted and probably they were buried alive, they were killed, they were buried elsewhere. The cadavers had never been found. Okay. Now, one more thing that's important in reading this. Pumipiglas also documented the technology and methods of torture employed by the military against the prisoners. So ang question there is, where do they learn the technology of torture? It was revealed there that the technology of torture was learned by Filipino officers of the military in the United States. When Filipino officers, my ranking officers, are sent to the United States for training and scholarship in the sites where they are trained and in their curriculum. Sa curriculum sa mga Filipino who are trained in the States, torture is part of their curriculum. How to torture political detainees, it's part of their of the knowledge that they gain there. It's true. In Chile, that's also been revealed. Ang mga Chileans that were trained by U.S. military learned their torture technology of torture in the schools of the United States. So Fort Bragg and Fort Benning, where they are trained. So examples ng political torture, tinatawag nila waterboarding. Waterboarding is if you are a detainee, they cover your mouth and nose with a towel, and then pour water into the towel, and you feel as if you are drowning. You would feel as if you are drowning because you cannot breathe, and if you breathe water, and water might enter your lungs. So that's really a terrible suffering. Why do they torture political detainees? Because they want political detainees to reveal names of their companions, or reveal secrets, or to reveal or to simply succumb to what they want, them to do. So Pumipiglas book had disclosed that. And when you read, it's not a enjoyable reading, I tell you. Pumipiglas is not enjoyable reading. It's a horror. It's a horror to read this text. Okay. Next slide, please. This book is not about Marcos martial law for me, because I really encountered this book on my own after reading all those things and after saying all those readings that I read before about martial law. I seek out a book which can help me explain this phenomenon of dictatorship, of fascism. As a political science student, fascism pala ito. This is a dictatorship, and this is a fascist dictatorship. So I want to look for a literature that can explain to me what fascism is. At least can clarify for me. A personal quest. And I encountered this book in the library. Later on, in fact, I bought a copy of this, but what's in the library was a hard copy. I bought a soft copy of this later on, pero much later on when I already graduated. And I enjoyed reading it, by the way. Herbert Marcuse is a philosopher. He's a German philosopher. He's part of the Frankfurt School, the so-called Frankfurt School of thinkers based in Germany. And in this book, it turned out to be his doctoral dissertation. So early work in Herbert Marcuse. Sa title pa lang, Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory, you know that when you read Marcuse here, kung nabasa mo si Marcuse dito sa sining libro, sa dissertation, you will also encounter as well Hegel's ideas. Because sa European tradition of academe, ganun yun eh. Parang ang ways dito is for students of philosophy or students of the academy, they will always encounter previous philosophers, parang a tradition of learning, a tradition of bodies of knowledge that their society that transpired in their society. So, example, we one time we met a fresh graduate ng French fresh graduate, babae niya sa Diliman. We met her, and then we somehow we come to talk about her. And then we asked her, when you were in high school like senior high school, what are required readings for you? That which you cannot get away from when you were in high school, diba? May textbook. You know what? For surprise, she told us no standard works of Descartes in their senior high school. In French, in original French, not in the English translation, because when I read Marcuse here, I was not reading his German language dissertation. No, when it was published, this was already translated into English. So ang European tradition of academic training is they read the work of their thinkers in their language. Yeah. So may tradition which seldom do we have. Filino is here. It says we always discuss when you read Rizal, Rizal is a Filipino. When you read the works of Rizal, you don't read them in his original Spanish. You already read them either in English translation by Guerrero or by Charles Derbyshire or other translations, or you read them in Filipino as translated by, let's say, Rayo Almario, or you read them, if this is interesting, there is an Ilonggo translation of Noli Me Tangere and the Filipisterismo. Very few probably didn't know that. If you want to read them in the Ilonggo or Hiligaynon translation, you can read them. But the thing is, serious philosophical bodies of knowledge in the European academe is encountered in the language. Well, anyhow, what does this work? Why is this work significant to me personally? Because you don't only encounter Hegel, as Marcuse discuss him in his dissertation, but you also encounter Karl Marx, because Marcuse is a Marxist. So Marcuse, this work tries to link Hegel and Marx. Okay, he tries to rescue Hegel in developing the idea nga Hegel is not really the source of Hegel's idea is not really the source of the social democrats in Germany at the time, or the Nazis, Nazi parties in Germany. Because the Nazi party always referred to Hegel. So parang naging popular sa Hegel as parang intellectual forefathers of the Nazis. So Marcuse wants to rescue that impression. No, he says no. If you take Hegel so seriously, you will separate him from from the Nazis, from the attribution of the Nazis to him that they are their intellectual forefathers. In fact, if you take a look at ang Hegelian dialectics, and that's the point there, you will note that if the Nazis had indeed borrowed from Hegel, they were very selective. They had not understood and they had not appreciated Hegel's dialectics. They only want to get what is the Nazis only want to get from Hegel what they want, parang their need to know. But in doing so, parang they did a disservice to Hegel, because what is important in Hegel is his dialectical method. So what Marcuse did is to retrieve an idea of dialectics in Hegel and connect it with Marx's understanding of dialectics. Okay. I hope you can still follow with me. This is what I think. Ang Hegelian dialectics deals with dialectics in the realm of idea, in the realm of concept. Okay, in the realm of concept. So, ang field of Hegelian dialectics is philosophy, while Marx's field of dialectics is already outside philosophy. And where is that? In the actual world, in the real world, because dialectics can be found in social classes in society. So, when you trace dialectics from Hegel to Marx, and dialectics is employed in the task of doing criticism or critique, Hegel critiqued philosophy dialectically. Meaning, pinapakita ni Hegel na all other philosophies like Aristotelian philosophy, logic is not enough. May critique siya of Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotelian logic, and he showed it to be different. Amo nang iyang dialectics, critical critique of previous philosophical logic, ang critique ni Hegel sa realms of philosophy. Pero ang critique ni Marx sa kay Hegel in developing dialectics is that in short na words which says that many philosophers describe the world, but the point is to change it. So meaning, ang critique should no longer be within the realm of philosophy. They should be brought into the realm of reality, in the actual real physical reality. So, kung mag-critique kita, if you employ critique, it should be what's happening in us. Hindi nga sa realm of ideas, hindi nga in the realm of ideas. I am saying this because, for instance, Marcos has produced a book entitled Today's Revolution in Democracy. Okay? If you want to critique Marcos, because you want to show that this book is incoherent or his book is bad intellectualism, you will read his book and then you critique it. Meaning, ipakita mo ang flaws of his reasoning or incoherence of his understanding of what democracy is. Okay? In fact, that has been done. In fact, that has been done by Filipino academics. Critique nila ang Marcos book na Today's Revolution Democracy, and shows that ang Today's Revolution Democracy is false. Ang thesis niya is untenable and false. But that's in the realm of the intellect. That's in the realm of theory. That's in the realm of philosophy. Ang real critique is in the realm of reality. Subong sa ang nakakatabo. So amo na ang appeal sang Marcus's understanding of Hegel and Marx here is that he locates for us. For the reader, hindi ka mag-preoccupy yourself too much in critiquing ideas, but preoccupy yourself on the real, on the actual. Dira mo makita kung indeed ang atong idea, if translated into reality, makes sense, or what does this idea do with people like us, with ordinary people like us? So kay Marx na, so mag-criticize ka sa martial law, it's not because of the theory that backs up martial law, but what are the consequences? What are the realities that results out of martial law? So, ang book and it was useful for me personally because it liberates me from philosophical musings. Parang pataasan ng ihi sa philosophy. No, when you want to understand yung phenomenon, you don't theorize. You don't preoccupy yourself too much with philosophizing just to show you are an intellectual and you want to understand a social phenomenon. What's real or what's practical is you criticize it in the actual. Okay, so because the next and last book I'll show you is the actual criticism of martial. Next slide, please, and the final slide. This is it. No, that one. This is by Epifanio San Juan, and the title is Crisis in the Philippines, the Making of Revolution, 1986. So, by then, 1986, just about the ouster of Marcos. Okay. Epifanio San Juan is a Filipino who is based in US, married to an Ilongga, and considered to be a global thinker na. He's a global. He usually visits several times. He already visited UPV because he has friends here, and he also visited Miagao to do lectures. It's unfortunate na he's already of age now. Probably seldom na siya nagpapauli. They usually visit Iloilo, and then we invite him to UP Miagao. So it's unfortunate with he's not visiting us. He's visiting us anymore. But anyhow, anong libro nga ini? Ang libro nga ini is the author San Juan's attempt to do a national situationer. Ano yung national situationer? National situationer is a work, it's a genre of work. Ang tawag natin si nutset sa language ng activist, nutset yun. National situationer. Kung gusto mo understand what's happening in the country, you do a nutset. Okay? How do you do a nutset? You do a nutset by paying close attention to a specific period. So dapat time-bound ang situation that you want to look at. Hindi history eh. You're not attempting to write the history of the Philippines, simply a national situation. So, ang time-boundness in book na is that Declaration of Martial Law of 1986. So, ganun yan, ang scope. Anong iaunod? He has to pay close attention sa sectors in Philippine society. What are these? So, specific sectors in Philippine society, say basic masses, middle class, dominant and dominating classes, or simply fractions thereof of the dominating classes. So, specific objects of observation when you do a NatSet. And then in the NatSet also, sa NatSet genre of work, ano mo ang balance of forces. So what are the balance of forces there? Of course, the forces of domination and the forces of resistance. Okay? Ang forces of domination, amo ni ang martial law, Marcos dictatorship, etc. Okay? Ang forces of resistance, amo ni ang mga actors, collective actors in Philippine society that resisted dictatorship. Or ang people in power, or ang class of factions in power. So, pinapakita sa NatSet, there is a libro nga what are the groups, what are the chapters, who are the actors in Philippine society from given that period? Anong situation? Of course, the situation is, nakabutan sa subtitles, there's a making of revolution. Dictatorship, Marcos dictatorship, the period of authoritarianism, produced a trajectory, which is the making of a revolution. So you can describe if you find someone describe all sectors, the politicization and radicalization of sectors, such that he can say that instead of a dictatorship, instead of producing complacent, you produced resistance instead. So women, so you can describe niya there ang women resistance. Okay, naging ang mga women is complacent. They became radicalized, etc., etc. Ang church also became radicalized. So within the church, may liberation theology, or later on theology of struggle, diba? Even formations ng Christians for National Liberation as part of the revolutionary movement in the church. Moro people, Moro resistance, diba? MNLF, MILF, Bangsamoro, freedom fighters. And of course, the Revolutionary Communist Party, so may description rin doon. So per chapter, the author described the development and evolution of those forces, of those social forces, of in sectors, or as groupings in society, like civil society. So that's what you do in the NatSet. Pero how to place it, how to put it together, if you read the book, dapat the one doing the NatSet in this case, may i-piece together mga information that you gather from all these observations. You piece them together in a diachronic and synchronic modalities. Standard yun sa history. Diachronic meaning structural ang pananaw, kag synchronic gani time, no? So sa kada time span, i-describe mo ang description sa structure. Kasi ang women sa una ang ila resistance only come to this, but later on they develop to form bigger and bigger organization na national. So una focus lang sa Manila, but focus lang sa some parts of the urban areas. But when it becomes expansive, it becomes a self-conscious movement. So makita mo nga hindi na ito pipitsugin na resistance movement women had come into, diba? women empowerment. Hindi pa man, ang mga women's movement at hindi pa man feminist movement, hindi pa, there are those who says nga they are, pero it's close there. It's quite close, ang women's movement, quite close to feminist movement. So what do you gain out of that analysis sa NATSET? What do you gain out of that? Then magkaroon ka ng ang author, ang kaging intended readers, magkaroon ng a total picture. Balikan ko lang itong number ko earlier, no? You have to have a total picture. You have to have a larger picture of what's happening. And what's happening, at least from the point of view of the author, is that, as I said, martial law, fascist dictatorship, Marcos and all the rest that corroborated with him had ironically, paradoxically, ang result niya is the politicization of sectors, groups, and parties, radicalization in Philippine society. So in mga bits and parts that we see and observe, the NATSET put them together, ang NATSET format or genre puts them together, no? Because may disposition kita towards synthesized knowledge. So this is made available to us, and in synthesis is made available to us. So yung disposition for synthesized knowledge, hindi lang ni human longing to knowledge or to understanding. Part of making sense of our life as individuals and as Filipinos. So as a public intellectual and a Filipino, San Juan did this book for us. So when I read it, hindi na ni martial law, hindi lang niya about ni martial law, pero beyond na sa scope sa martial law. In fact, graduate na po when I read this. So that's all. That's all I can share for this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you Sir Tom,
Okay.
sa pagbabahagi ng inyong kaalaman.
Gusto ma-entertain lang ko mga 1 or 2 questions because I had an engagement by 3:30 o dali na lang. Sige, mga 1 question na lang.
Okay, sir. Mag-proceed na lang sa question. So, from Professor Felino S. Garcia, 2 state universities in Northern Luzon, Kalinga State University and Bicol State University, most recently had their libraries purged of reading materials published by the Communist Party of the Philippines, National Democratic Front, and even materials that deal with peace agreements with the CPP, NDF, in order to halt the dissemination of so-called insurgent ideology. This is also a response to the Duterte regime's whole of nation unconstitutional and whole of the nation approach to the communist insurgency. Isn't this unconstitutional and curtails basic academic freedom of both teachers and students? Isn't this government policy fascistic and reminds us of martial law?
Hindi na ako I won't discuss whether it's constitutional or what. Ako lang ang pinaka bottom line is it deprives students of knowledge. Could you imagine that? No? If you remove this, parang naging anti-intellectualism yun. And if you remove these books from your library consciously and making it public, mayugani, no? To me it's good because the students will get curious. Why are they being removed? And if they are curious, even if they're removed, they will look for them. So, ganun yan, parang you provoke or you stimulate, in fact, curiosity.
Yes.
And I look forward to that. Kasi ang students ngayon, less curious di ba? With social media, etc. Less curious sila. But, so for those who have not encountered, siguro very few, in fact, go to the library. Sa totoo lang, di ba? But if you now go to the library, but if they heard that these books are removed from their library, what will they do? They will search that in Google. And hopefully, some of these are in PDF. Diba?
Yes, sir.
So kung na PDF copy, my goodness, how are they going to burn the PDF copy? So that's good.
Yes.
I congratulate the NTF-LCAC in concocting that intelligent policy of removing the books from the library. Because sa totoo lang, kukunti lamang talaga ang pupunta ng library. Diba?
Yes,
Now,
sir.
the joke here is this. When I was taking up some courses in Diliman, ang joke sa amon sa teacher is, class, the problem now is very few people, there are now very few instances where books are stolen from the library. So instead of being happy, I'm sad. I was a teacher naman. It means very, very few are now interested in really reading books. So thank God for that.
Another question, Sir Tom. Does Pumipiglas also document TFD activity or cases in the Visayas, or is there literature to read about the TFD in Visayas?
Yeah. Itong pag-mention ko kanina, may case studies yan eh. Ang pag-mention ko kanina sa case ni Maria Luisa Puso Dominado, ang entry dito is detention experience. So, ang book, may chapters na describe nationally, and then it is may representatives of the case studies. So I think ang kay Maria Luisa Puso Dominado nga cases nga writings dito was a case study. If I picture dito. Oh, ano na? Sige na, isa pag-ikasa, isa na questions as I'm leaving.
Isa pa question, sir. Available po ba ang mga readings online? Ang mga suggest mo, sir? Recommend?
I think pero I don't know, sa Diliman Library siguro, when you go into UPA, tanuan nyo, right there.
Okay, sir. Does anyone, thank you, Sir Tom, for your discussion, and thank you so much sa pagbahagi ng kaalaman niyo, sir. It really is very important na we know where to get information, especially those who did not experience or did not live back then. So
but ang take ko lang sinadara. Yun naman experience yan, so there are things that we don't experience. Have we ever experienced one? Let's say, Abby, sa history major, things that are happening in the past, there's no demand for us to experience them.
Yes.
And experience natin subong is different from the past. But it doesn't mean that less valid ang what happened in the past because we have not personally experienced. Kung ang tanan lang natin na personal experience is what matters to us, our life is short. Di ba? Our life is short. So, hindi ka magpatingara, alive si Plato and Aristotle, hindi ka magpatinga, Philippines was colonized by the Spaniards for 400 years because when we were born, they had already left us. Diba? Pero ang logic sinang mga, well, you have not experienced it, and you cannot say anything about it, etc. Ang loss of physical, ang loss of physics, you don't experience that personally, di ba? And yet you believe. Kasi pwede sasabi, nakitaan mo din around the earth. Only astronauts have experienced that, right? So, kunwari ka di, flat, Earth flat. Ano kung panisinin na ang term nila?
Flat earther.
Come again?
Flat earthers.
Flat earthers? My goodness. Mga ridiculous. Sige. So, thank you very much. And I hope you'll enjoy the Pagtukib activity today. Thank you very much and good afternoon to all.
Thank you, sir. We miss you, sir.
Thank you, Sir Tom.
Bye-bye.
Ayun. So, mag-proceed na tayo for sa questions for Sir Elgin. Hello. So again, kung may tanong kayo, may mga may link sa Google Form na nasa chat box that you can send your questions. Okay, to Sir
Question. Sorry.
Elgin. Your question goes this way, Char.
Question number 1, Char.
Let me said. Sir. Can it be said, sir, that Marcos was also the number one recruiter of the MNLF? Kaya parang it's erroneous to say that, or to justify martial law because of the communist and Islamic insurgency. Kasi it was the conditions mismo under the regime, corruption, exploitation, and land grabbing, which led these communities to resist.
Yeah, exactly. Especially yung dumadami na din yung mga tao sa mainland Mindanao, especially from the north and from Visayas, especially Visayas. So, napipil kasi na mga Moros na hindi sila napakinggan. Kumbaga, hindi sila napakinggan mismo ng nasa Manila, the center of power. At the same time, like yung nasabi ko kanina, merong power division din sa loob ng Mindanao. Like, na-threaten sila matalam kasi kinokontrol ni Marcos kung sino yung gusto niyang maging kaalyado. And para sa mga other Islamic leaders, they felt threatened by those things. So, parang it's a very multifaceted parang maraming layers na dapat natin titingnan dito. Yung kasaysayan, nung panahon ng mga Spaniards until the American colonialism. Tapos dito papasok yung nationalism that was really influenced during that time. We have the Arab nationalism by Nasser. Then, dito din papasok yung mga Maoist influence sa movement. Pero of course, ibang usapan yun. But the thing is, because of these problems, these people asserted their right for their self-determination. Because of all these problems, all these abuses that they personally witnessed. Like, just imagine na lang, kasi if you go back to their culture, malaki yung pagpapahalaga nila sa concept of honor. So, based sa mga interviews ko din sa mga sa mga narrators ko, parating nila sinasabi na kasi namatay yung kapatid ko kaya nag-join ako sa MNLF. Kasi yung para sa kanila, kung ano tama para sa kanila, yun na yun, ipaglalaban nila hanggang kamatayan. So may ganun silang kultura. So malaking impluwensya din yun para mas naging stronger yung movement, especially in Mindanao. Yun.
Thank you, sir. So I believe this is the last question na may na rin. Thank you so much for the new information. I have thought that martial law is highly regional and is concentrated in the north. I have been enlightened. However, there was an interview with MNLF leader Nur Miswari supporting Bongbong Marcos. His philosophy is, the fault of the father is not inherited by the son. He himself, as the founder of MNLF, which was founded because of the Jabida massacre, does not hold grudge on Bongbong Marcos. My question is it wrong if an individual has the same or different philosophy as him? The thing that baffles me is that they experienced it firsthand, but they did not hold a grudge on the son. How come we who has not experienced can't copy his philosophy? Is it wrong to have the same philosophy as him?
Yeah. Okay, very interesting actually ito na question. Like, top-notch, magandang question to. Number one, we need to understand Nur Miswari as a person. Kasi yung hindi kasi linear yung philosophy or anong mga paniniwala ni Miswari throughout his life. No, like for example, pumasok sa UP, naging Marxist siya. Then later on, because of the Jabida massacre and because of the founding of the Moro National Liberation Front, he subscribed to some sort of Islamic ideologies. No, dito papasok yung mga Islamic ideologies niya. Then nag-evolve siya. Before siya naging Islamist, naging professor din siya sa Asian Center sa college namin noon. So, college ko. So, meron din siyang perspective of connecting Asia or connecting Mindanao to the rest of Asia. So, of course, Sulu, dito papasok yung role ng Sulu dito. So, titingnan natin yung philosophy ni Miswari. So, ang point ko dito is, kailangan natin tingnan yung relevant. I-weed out natin yung mga relevant aspect or relevant philosophies niya para sa atin napakahalaga upang mapayabong pa yung knowledge on our identities or identities of the Bangsamoro. Pero we also have as intellectuals or as people in the academe or as members of this society, of course, meron din tayong rights kung ano yung tatanggalin natin, kung ano yung hindi masyado mahalaga or kung ano pinaka-problematic na mga stance niya. Like for example, supporting Bongbong Marcos in his I think vice president pa yun that time. So yeah, so dapat marunong tayo compartmentalize, ganon. Kung mahalaga, edi gagamitin natin. Pero kasi meron ganito kasi yan, especially in the academe, hindi naman lahat ng mga tinuturo, no, or kung ano mga prinsipyo mo, acceptable talaga. Meron pa rin talaga mga problematic stance, and we need to accept that. So for example, may mga Marcos apologies ng mga historians. I-connect ko na lang sa question na isa-isa. Actually, may ibang mga historians doon, may mga maganda yung mga stance nila, but nung pumasok si Duterte, parang mas lalong pumangit yung kanilang mga punto de vista. So, for example, I will give a very specific example on this. Merong I'm not sure if this is the right place to throw shades. May mga Visayan scholars na ginagamit ang pagkabastos ni Duterte, pero gina-justify nila pagkabastos ni Duterte na kasi parte yan ng Visayan culture. Tapos may ginagawa sila ng framework to justify that, and it's very problematic. So yun, so the point here is we need to learn how to compartmentalize stuff. Para sa atin, kung ano mahalaga, yun ang i-embrace natin. Kung hindi siya mahalaga, let's criticize it because come on, this is part of discourse making. Yun. Yeah.
Thank you Sir Elgin for sa pagbahagi ng iyong kaalaman, and thank you rin kay Sir Tom for his
okay. Can I add something? Kasi may point si Bernalyn sa chat box about that's what we asked to, because it's so sad to see his grads who don't use what was taught to them. Diba? Especially in history, we have historiography classes where we criticize how history was written. So that thing is, may kasi sometimes meron din tayong personal rim. May personal rim na tawag ng pangangailangan. Kumbaga, I can name two historians, but I will not name them. Kumbaga, nung panahon ng martial law, naging writers sila ng Tadhana Project. Sorry. Tapos, parang kasi nung time na yon, maliit lang yung sahod din ng mga UP professors, no? So that's why nung inoffer sa ng demonyo yung magsulat ka ng book na to, okay, so tinanggap nila kasi tawag din ng pangangailangan nila yon. So but the thing is, of course, the history will judge you. What kind of scholar are you? Diba? At the end of the day, anong klaseng scholar ka? Are you giving an impact, especially sa anong impact ang gusto mong ipalabas, especially sa public? So yun yung gusto ko i-point out. Yun lang.
Thank you, sir. Ayun. Ngayon naman, tayo ay dadako sa paggawad ng sertipiko sa ating mga tagapagsalita. Bilang pasasalamat sa oras na kanilang nilaan para makapagsalita ngayong hapon. The certificate reads, Certificate of Appreciation is hereby awarded to Professor Tomas T. Taliedo for sharing his time and imparting valuable insights in his talk entitled What Literature to Encounter to Know Better Marcos's Martial Law during the 4th Balud Wave-inar History Lecture Series with the theme Pagtukib, Uncovering the Untold Stories of Marcos's Martial Rule, given this 25th day of September 2021. Signed, General Matthew P. Tuazon, Chairperson, UPV Camaragtas, and Tania Margaret O. Coronica, Advisor UPV Camaragtas. Kaparehong sertipiko ang igagawad kay Ginoong Elgin Glenn Salomon for his talk entitled Testimonial Narratives of Tausug Survivors during the 1974 Battle of Jolo during the 4th Balud Wave-inar History Lecture Series. Signed, Gerald Matthew Tazon, Chairperson UPV Camaragtas, and Tania Margaret O. Coronica, Advisor UPV Camaragtas. And bago naman tuluyang matapos ang ating webinar, aking tinatawagan ang chairperson ng UPV Camaragtas, si Ginoong Gerald Matthew Tuazon, para sa panapos na pananalita.
So ayun guys, isang makasaysayang hapon sa ating lahat at mula sa UPV Camaragtas, nais naming pasalamatan ang lahat sa mga naglaan ng kanilang oras at panahon upang makadalo sa webinar na ito. Sa ating mga tagapagsalita ngayong hapon, Sir Tom at Sir Elgin, sa mga guro na nandito ngayon, sa ating mga partner organization at media partner, at sa mga kapwa ko kabataan at estudyante na hindi nakatubiling sumama sa aming paglalakbay tungo sa kalagatan ng kaalaman sa panahong talamak ang pilit na pagbaluktot sa salaysay ng ating nakaraan. Sa maglilimang dekada na matapos tayong isailalim sa isa sa pinakamadilim na yugto sa ating kasaysayan, ngunit tila nabubura ang mga kwento ng pang-aabuso, pamamalupit at pakikibaka laban sa diktatorya sapagkat unti-unti itong binabaon sa limot sa pamamagitan ng paglipanan ng mga impormasyon na pilit mabaluktot sa ating kasaysayan at isang malaking hamon sa atin na nasa bagong panahon or nasa bagong henerasyon na labanan ang mga pagtangkang ito. Ating gunitain ang mga biktima, martir at bayani na inialay ang kanilang buhay sa ngalan ng kalayaan, demokrasya at karapatan na ating tinatamasa ngayon. At naway ating isabuhay ang kanilang mga aral sa pagkikipaglaban sa mapang-abusong estado, lalo na sa panahong muli tayong bumabalik sa dilim ng nakaraan sa ilalim ng pamumuno ni Duterte at unti-unting pagbalik sa kapangyarihan ng mga Marcos. So bilang susunod na tagapagsalaysay ng bayan, ating gampanan ng ating tungkulin na pangalagaan at ipagtanggol ang ating kasaysayan laban sa mga natatangkang agawing muli ito sa atin. Patuloy tayong mamulat at magpamulat at sabay-sabay na tayong kumilos at panindigan kasama ng sambayanan sa pagkikipaglaban sa pasismo, tiraniya at diktatorya. Ang ating sigaw, ating panawagan sa ngayon ay never again, never forget at no to historical distortion. Sa muli, maraming salamat at magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Tuazon. Paalala rin sa ating mga kalahok na bago matapos ang programa, ipadadala sa chat box ng Zoom at sa comment section ng Facebook Live at YouTube ang evaluation form na kinakailangan sagutan upang makuha ang sertipiko ng pagdalo sa talakayang ito. Yan. So, dito nagtatapos ang ating ika-4 na edisyon ng Balud Wave-inar History Lecture Series na may temang Pagtukib, Uncovering the Untold Stories of Marcos's Martial Rule. Ang balod ay hatid sa inyo ng UPV Camaragtas, katuwang ang UPV College of Arts and Sciences Student Council, UPV Sakdag, UPV Economicus, UPV Statistical Society, UPV Biological Society, UPV PH Pub, UPV Discursos, UPV Sociological Society, Antica National School Supreme Student Government at West Visayas State University Social Science Student Society. Pasasalamat din sa mga sumusunod na media partners, ang UPV Chemistry Society, upvcomsci.org, UPV Mathematics Circle, UPV Libertas, UPV Tacloban College Student Council, UPV College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences Student Council, UPV School of Technology Student Council, at UPV University Student Council. So, again, ako si Frances Tumaneng at patuloy nating pag-aralan ang kasaysayan upang makamit ang isang lipunang malaya. Maraming salamat at isang makasaysayang hapon sa lahat. Hanggang sa muli.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sir Elgin, thank you.
Sure. Good luck, guys.
Sir Rad, thank you, Gid. Thank you, everyone.
Huwag niyong kalimutan yung yung evaluation form.
Yung evaluation form, guys.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Thank you po.